Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to wherever you are in the world. Welcome back to a brand new series here on RCI TV on Monday, and we're back with another one make championship. And this time, as you can see on your screens, it's the turn of the Porsche 992 GT3 Cup. Round three tonight finds us at Valencia, just over 4 kilometers in length, with 14 turns. I'm your lead commentator for tonight, John Dalton, alongside me, Jesse Lee. And as always, Stewie behind the cameras. Also, not forgetting, of course, the live stewards. Welcome, everyone.
John, hello everybody out there at home as well. What a treat we have for you on a Monday evening here on RCI TV. We've got a hotly contested championship. Maybe I should say multiple hotly contested championships. A couple of rounds behind us, a messy round down at Barcelona, but a better, more competitive round at Monza, and now the newest track, Assetto Corsa Competizione. We are at Valencia, a track where most drivers will know better for motorbikes, will likely have limited time and practice in a Porsche Cup around here. Should be competitive. It's going to be a wild one. Can't wait to get going.
Yeah, of course, like you say, most people rehearse maybe in GT3 formats of racing here. Not so much, of course, in the 992 GT3 Cup. Wojtek Dvorak is your first man on the circuit tonight in the number 340 Porsche Motorsports. We're going to jump on board the helmet cam and give you a rundown of tonight's circuit. Of course, a nice long main straightaway. Get as far over to the right-hand side as you can. Really open up the corner, but be careful of the pit exit, cutting back very suddenly for turn one. Track limits are above and beyond for turn one, but only turn one, so be very careful. And being told already this is an invalid lap. However, obviously progressing towards turn two, we're going to see a lot more overtaking as people get, of course, runs up through turn one, down the main straight and into two. Heavy braking zone, of course, into four. Three before was the kink. At five, a nice long swooping right-hander. Got to be very crucial on your throttle control here. Don't want to over-rotate the car as we saw Mike Redford do on his outlap. Now, turn six, again, crucial to get a good exit through here. Renault Ricci, armfuls of opposite lock on the cold Pirelli tyres. Of course, no tyre blankets for the guys tonight, so you've got to be super careful on your first couple of outlaps. Now, the big long braking zone into turn eight. It's almost like a double apex left-hander before you shoot it out to the right-hand side to cut back for the left, and then the right again into another slow hairpin corner of course, turn 11. Now, turn 12, my favorite corner of the circuit. It's an uphill right-hander, nice curb on the inside, and a big bump on the outside. So, gotta be super careful to manage that. And you just see the amount of movement Renault Ricci's car has over the bump on the exit before the long swooper of 13, hard braking into turn 14. Or, of course, we find ourselves back on the main straightaway for the first time on the board from Renault Ricci. Of course, Dvorak did invalidate into turn one. Let's see what can the man do. It's a 1:33.260. Very solid opening lap, if I say so, Jesse.
It was a nice lap. It's not a long lap around here at Valencia either. It's a circuit that looks inconspicuous. It looks about the same length of maybe of Barcelona, but actually quite more compact than that. A lot of the corners are quicker than they first appear. I think there's going to be some doubt about a lot of these positions. Everybody now coming in about 1.5 to 1.6 seconds slower than Miguel Renault Ricci was able to do on their lap. That tells me that Renault Ricci might have actually been on it most of the time. Come to a track maybe you don't have as much practice at than others. But take it easy. You go out there, you set a lap, you feel out your competition. That hasn't happened for Renault Ricci at any point in this championship thus far. You'd hardly believe they would start doing that today. Rafael Hill comes in 3/4 of a second down, but more importantly, the quickest of the silver drivers, just out qualifying Andy Boardman for that first spot in silver. 3 different classifications with you this week, as we always do. A white number placard is pro, silver is, well, silver, and red is the amateur rookie, not rookie. It is the AM class. There is a rookie class in ACC. Nobody tends to use it, however, but that is not the case here today. 3 different championships going head-to-head. They will be intermingling, racing each other too, of course, but more importantly than anything, their class up for grabs. Dvorak does right the wrongs. It comes across the line and runs a 33.292. Good enough for provisional pole in the silver class.
Yeah, silver drivers today do seem quite on it in comparison to previous rounds. Of course, Rafael Huel currently up into P4, make that P5 now with Klaus Nyring shooting himself towards the second row of the grid in the number 20 Nyring racing car. But silver drivers looking very content with the circuit here today at Valencia. A few of them have said it's one of the more pleasant circuits to, of course, drive the cup car around, and Bathurst being rumoured on their lips, of course. Again, later on in the calendar, we do head down under with this car. Ollie Brocklehurst to the line. He shoots himself up into P5. First time out for Brocklehurst. We've seen in this championship in the number 10. So it'll be interesting to see what he can do. Richard Phillips, of course, RPMS regular to the RCI club, should we say, up into P14 now. He's got a couple of AM cars either side of him. Dvorak showing as an AM, which that's not right, Jesse, is it? I thought Dvorak.
That's a different Dvorak.
There's too many Dvoraks in this. Jesse.
No, there's not. Don't say that. There is not too many Dvoraks. We have the exact right amount. This is Vit Dvorak. This is a different Dvorak. There's some extra accents on that as well. So if I'm mispronouncing that, I do apologize. Vit, certainly for that. But yeah, we got a couple of Dvoraks in the race, and that is somewhat new to us here in the booth. It's for a loop for a second. Vit has to the AM class. Kevin Boss back to racing action this week. I've just noticed they are P3 in that class as well, as Voce Dvorak up at the front of the field continues to try and improve, hanging on to P2. Done so over Rafael Huel. Further improvements by Rena Ritchie. That's a 32 now. Able to run a 32.8 to be more precise up at the front of the field. Unrivaled by the pros thus far.
Renault Ritchie really out front at the moment, proving, you know, his true talent in this car. He's had a very dominant season so far already, and of course looking to continue that here today at Valencia. Meanwhile, riding aboard, of course, with Jake Boswell in the number 47. Boswell, one of the RCI staff members here. Of course, it's great to get the staff members down on the track. No Les Stevenson tonight. Some of you will be watching out for him, of course, in the Talladega NASCAR themed livery. NASCAR did hit Talladega just this weekend, so very fitting for a Monday race. But no Les Stevenson, he is off sunning himself. Jake Boswell does improve up into P16. A couple of good slots jumped there for him. And the more confusing thing, Jesse Lee, between the Dvoraks is they are both in the same livery. So it's going to get very, very confusing later on as well, especially if they find themselves together on the circuit. Not helping us up here in the comms box by, of course, picking a unique livery. Christian Lindgren for the Sim Brothers Racing Team up into P3 provisionally in the number 48. Another driver that's had a splendid season so far, although half a second off Renault Ritchie's time. He's got a big gap to fill there. And Martin Foster, another one of the RPMS SimSport cars. You do see these up and down the grid in various RCI guises throughout various championships that we do host here. So, of course, another regular face that we recognize up here in the booth. Currently down in P20 overall, of course. That's fourth in the AM class once you count the number of red squares going down the list. And Roscam streaking ahead of the AM field tonight. He's in with the mid-silvers. I know Tim Ireland has had to make some category adjustments at the beginning of the season, so maybe a little bit of a mid-season adjustment there as Martin Foster clatters the curb all over the exit bump as well, wrestling the cup car in a straight line. Klaus Nyring staying way out of the way into turn 13. He goes, dives on the brakes for 14 and gets a nice clean exit for a run to the line. Can Martin Foster improve his position? Can he take any further AM spots off the grid? To the line he goes. He does shuffle himself up into P3, and that puts Kevin Boss down a couple of positions as well. Kevin Boss now in P4 overall for AM.
Is Roscam holding on to P1 in that category, the AM category, of course, into the pit lane. They've been there for just a little bit. We'll see the 96 back out on the racetrack at any point. Right now, with a little less than 6 minutes to play in this qualifying session, they're certainly still in the lane.
Yeah, still plenty of time on the clock. Of course, you've got enough for maybe 1 or 2 laps in the tank yet, as Callum Kerrigan finds his way somewhere. This is turn 12. We said about it earlier, didn't we, with the bump on the inside. Just maybe caught it a little bit too much. Backed out the throttle, of course, shifted all the weight off the rear of the Porsche. And, of course, the rear then overtook the front end. But very easy to lose the rear in these cars, of course. They are very different to their GT3 partners, of course. Less aero. You've got a massive rear wing hanging over a little front splitter lip, and really all about it on these cars. So they're rockets in a straight line. Not so good when they come to the corners, of course, trying to put all the power down with limited area. You've really got to be careful on the throttle. No traction control in these cars, only ABS. So make it a little bit more driver friendly, but you've still got to be super careful. Of course, NA engine over the rear axle, very easy to light up the rear tires. Mike Redford across the line does improve, but not a valid lap, unfortunately. So I think he's possibly dropped some tires off somewhere. Of course, we were talking earlier about track limits, Jesse. We saw World Tour, of course, here just a few months ago, and that was track limits galore. As we see a race replay here, our own event admin, Tim Ireland.
Tim Ireland, he walks the walk, he talks the talk. He's going to set up the races, he's going to run the races. Some seesawing of the wheel, realizing that they have cooked the tires a little bit there and something amiss. They have taken the Syndedelic baby Porsche Cup car back to the pit lane. Starting to try to get her, maybe not, as they still sit in the lane. Joe Dauber joined us in chat to say that they guarantee they qualify last in their class. Class, of course, is pro. And I found that interesting. I wondered if Joe was just being a little bit down on his ability here. His cars, no, that's not the case. That's not what he meant to convey. What he was actually conveying was he's going to start from the pit lane. This is the second time in as many races that I've seen the last few days that he's done exactly that. Able to, I think, at Bathurst in Nightow, he qualified P5, started from the pit lane on purpose, and then ended up finishing P5 overall anyway. An excellent job there. I wonder if Joe is doing something similar here today. Maybe a last to first challenge. See how that works out. But Joe Dauber, the pro driver, sitting in the pit lane on purpose here. He has that 3 minutes left of qualifying and everything to play for. The track started out green. We've seen remarkable improvement by nearly everybody simply because the track itself has improved. Nothing to complain about from the weather. 24 degrees track, 20 degrees ambient, of course. Now the track fast, so improving all the time. Many cars putting rubber down to help that. Pablo Ordonez for Odox Motorsports goes P4. That was the lap they were looking for. 33.437. Spots them inside of the top five. A little over 4/10 off of provisional pole, but more like it for some of these pros.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Jesse Lee, and I just want to touch, of course, on Joe Dauber's point about starting from the pit lane. Of course, last week at Monza, we saw Mike Redford elect to take a pit lane start, and of course, he went on to win the AM category overall. So, possibly a very sensible start. Of course, Valencia turn one. I mean, even in real life GT3 racing, it can be pretty chaotic sometimes, of course, with the extra runoff area, drivers darting back on, being a bit blindsided as they try and rejoin the track. Of course, cars everywhere. It can be a very messy corner indeed. Raphael Huell with a big drift out of the last corner does improve ever so slightly up into P5. That's good to see for him. Jake Boswell, of course, still down in P18 at the moment. He's mixing in with some of the AM drivers, so pace maybe just not there today for Jake Boswell, but not all about raw pace, of course. When we come to the race, Jesse, it is about that magic word, and that is consistency. Of course, if you can remain consistent in a cup car, you are going to pay yourself dividends come the end of the race. Mike Redford improves from P23 up to P20 overall. Of course, that's P4 in the AM class, so he's setting himself up for a strong beginning of the race. Meanwhile, Vorak with a little bit of traffic. Thought I saw ahead of him. I did indeed, blocked by the wiper. Not sure who that is. Possibly Andy Boardman. Looks like ahead of him. So shouldn't be too much of a hindrance. Of course, Andy Boardman also in the silver class. Currently, Andy in P10. Of course, just
Miguel
about.
Martin.
Miguel Martins? Looks more like an Andy Boardman. Could be right there. No, it is Miguel Martins. I see the brown. The brown on the front.
See, it's all in the details, apparently. Miguel Martin, of course, getting out of the way, realizing that Voce Dvorak on a lap doesn't want to impede that. That's sort of the camaraderie that you can get with races like this. Nobody out there is intentionally trying to hold each other up, at least, of course, Miguel Martins or a lot of the other drivers, things considered. Dvorak coming to the line, the 340, looking for an improvement, and gets it, a 33.117. Exactly 1/4 second off of pole. That is a pretty hefty improvement. Sets him apart a 1/4 second. Christian Lindgren in third, who's now in the pit lane.
Yeah, so a lot of drivers currently in the pit lane, so they've called it a day. Of course, Lindgren, Ordonez, Huel, and Menez Rodriguez. Still a few cars circulating around. Of course, Dvorak's managed to get another lap under his belt. Miguel Martins chasing behind as well. So the last thing he wants to do is, of course, hinder Martins on his fast lap, especially after he did move out of the way. And I think Dvorak would do the honourable thing. It looks like Martins is the faster car, but still Dvorak is chasing that overall pole position. He's already got pole position in silver. Of course, next nearest car, Rafael Huel down in P5, and then Menez Rodriguez down in P8, who had an absolute rocket ship of a car at Monza, trimmed all of the wing out of it, and of course was very fast in a straight line, but came to the corners and was nearly swallowed up by everyone. Andy Boardman coming to the end of his lap into turn 14. He goes, hopefully getting a clean exit to the line, and he does so, keeps it within the track limits. Of course, most drivers using some of the pit entrance to open up the corner that little bit more. Andy Boardman to the line does improve, but not enough to improve overall grid position. And as Rodriguez off in the gravel at turn 12, so he will seek no more improvement either. And meanwhile, this man here, Roman Geiken, the only car I think circulating at the moment on a valid lap, so the whole broadcast is his, and he bails off into the pit lane, of course, trying to maybe practice a pit entry. Of course, a mandatory pit stop here tonight. As always, we will cover that later on broadcast. But here is your final results for qualifying. And interesting again, Jesse Lee, not one driver getting all three fastest sectors. Borak very quick in the last sector compared to Renault Ritchie.
Super rare when you see one driver take all three quickest sectors. It's not Formula One after all. We actually have competition here. But this is the overall. Miguel Reno Ritchie on pole position to absolutely nobody's surprise. The only driver in the 32s, that 32.867 he set just after the halfway point in the session, good enough for pole position. And of course, pole in their class for Dvorak as well in the 340. Had the quickest third sector, a 33.117. Good enough to get it done there. Those two drivers share the front row. Lindgren Ordonez, the next row. And of course, Rafael Huel, second in silver. Klaus Nyring and Brocklehurst in seventh. Menez Rodriguez in eighth place. Boardman got all the way up at eight. Yao Manso rounds out your top 10. And I've got to say it, best last name in sim racing, 11.
Plays the best last name in sim racing, indeed.
Unless it's Lee Kettle, and then that's the best first name in sim racing.
So we need a Lee Kingston Lee maybe for the ultimate name there. Richard Phillips, of course, in P12, Geiken P13, Roscam 14th, Martins managed the 15th. Second of Dvorak's in P16, John Aracer 17, followed by Jake Boswell in 18th. Martin Foster in P19, of course, a couple of cars between him and his AM rivals. Hutchings, Boss, Redford, Kerrigan, Ireland, Racer, and of course Joe Dorber, who chose not to qualify and will be starting, of course, from the pit lane. So your eye on the 777 to, of course, see what they can do. And as always, it's time for the championship standings. We don't have a flag for Renault Ritchie on our overlay. We will get that fixed soon, I promise. So Renault Ritchie, of course, at the head of the field with 141 points. Nick Babin in second with 114. Joachim Shelgren with 97. Klaus Nyring and Nico Kumpu tied on 88. Christian Lindgren on 74. Juan Pablo Ordonez on 58. Joe Dorber on 44. Ollie Brocklehurst on 0. And Jordan Daly and everybody else on the next page has signed out of the championship and will take no further part. Kevin Tutick being the second driver there. Now let's move on to the silver standings. Of course, Menez Rodriguez at the top of the field with 141, dominating silver at the moment from Richard Phillips with 90. Borak just behind him with 86. And then just behind them is Miguel Martins on 84. Les Stevenson currently on holiday with 71. Matthew Kingston Lee with 62. John Aracer on 60. Raphael Huel on 58. Roman Geiken on 56. Benjamin Schumann on 53. Rounds out your top 10 of silver. Now, moving on to the next page, we have Andy Boardman and Jake Boswell tied on 48 points apiece. Yao Manzo on 44, and three drivers have signed out of the Silver Championship and take no further part. Now, moving, of course, into the AM section where it's a lot closer towards the top. Mike Redford leads Tim Ireland 129 points to 113. Martin Foster just behind them on 110. Richard Hutchings chasing up the rear on 95. Callum Kerrigan with 92. Ibiza Racer with 84. And Vilas Mas with 81. Roscam, Kevin Boss, and the second of the Dvoraks yet to score rounds out your top 10. Was expecting a second page, however,
Apparently
was
there's 10
not
of
to
them.
be in hand. There's a perfect 10 drivers in AM. And of course, it's cars gridding up, getting ready to, of course, fire the engines and get going on an important warm-up lap. As we said earlier in the broadcast, of course, no tyre blankets for the cars. So tires start out at a very cold temperature. So first lap, very crucial of the brake drag. And of course, last time out at Monza, we had a chaotic end with Richie fighting Babin all race before Babin, of course, ran out of fuel on the last lap, was pushed from Ascari all the way to the curve of Alboreto before leaving him high and dry as Ordonez closed in. Wojtek Dvorak then pushed Babin the remainder until the line. Silver, of course, was won by Menez Rodriguez after trimming all the wing out the car, making it a rocket ship straight line, as we said on earlier on the broadcast. Raphael Huell and Richard Phillips came in second and third. Mike Redford, of course, prevailed from his pit lane start from Richard Hutchings and Martin Foster to make it an all-British podium. And of course, I'm very excited to see how tonight goes. I think my money again is on Renault Ritchie tonight, Jesse, but Silver and the Arms that are having all of the action in this championship.
It certainly is. It's been action-packed from the very first race at Barcelona, and we didn't really know what we were going to get out of this championship. Drivers in the previous iterations of Porsche Cup here on RCI TV had gotten so comfortable with how the 992 used to handle in the old tire model. We hadn't had a Porsche Cup in the new tire model era, and it has thrown a huge wrench into the works, a spanner, if you will, for the British audience, for everybody. Lack of control of these cars, inability to keep it under control in some instances, invalidation of laps, drive-through penalties. I think you're going to see the lot. It's going to run the gambit here tonight as well. It's a track that not a lot of people have a lot of experience on. In fact, we touched on Jake Boswell earlier on. He had not raced this track until today, literally a few hours ago. Needed to do his track medals to even get in the server. So that's what he did before practice started today. His first laps at Valencia were an hour ago just to get into the server. Ended up qualifying. He said he was about 3 or 4 seconds off of what the pros were. And the fact that he qualified within 2 seconds of the pros tells me that he's made remarkable progress quite early in the I think that's a very unique thing to Jake Boswell, but that kind of furthers my point. There's not a lot of practice that you could have done leading up to this race, or that you would have done, because you likely wouldn't have saw this coming. It's a treat for us. It's going to be a treat for them. The question becomes, who can limit mistakes today? Because who does that might just win this thing. And by the way, Mike Redford, as good as Redford was last week at Monza, had the people in his class higher up not had their incidents, I don't think he would have made it back to the front. So there you go. He who limits their issues today could find themselves winning out.
Yeah, I mean, said it earlier in the broadcast, didn't we, Jesse, about track limits at Valencia being very finicky sometimes. Of course, turn one has all of the extra runoff right up to the green AstroTurf, I believe, the limit on turn one, and then everything else around the circuit is, of course, only up to the curb. So really throws off a little bit of mentality on these drivers. So certainly going to be a race of attrition this evening. It's going to be about who can keep their nose clean, of course, who can keep their cup car out of trouble. And as always, with a one-make series, you've really got to find where you have the advantage over your opponent. Cars, of course, now gridding up 2 by 2, getting ready to take, of course, the green flag here. It's a very long drag from the final corner all the way to the start line gantry. Watch to the top middle of your screen. Of course, when the red goes to green, we shall be underway. Of course, 1 hour on the clock for this evening. One mandatory pit stop, and we are away. Renault Ritchie with a great start over to the right-hand side of your screen. Dvorak already moving over to try and cover off, of course, Christian Lindgren and Ordonez behind. 2 by 2 they go through the first corner. Some cars, of course, using all of the extra runoff. 3 wide in the AM and the silver split towards the back end of the field they go, filtering now into turn 2. Of course, this is the pinch point. This is where it normally goes wrong, but alas, it hasn't. Through turn 3 we go, still too wide in places. We saw this end in World Tour in tears for some drivers, and we got 2 cars off. That looks like Miguel Martin's involved with somebody else there. We're going to have to wait for the live timing to catch itself up, of course, as they all pass through the first sector. Renault Ritchie miles out front. He's kept it very clean indeed. I think Christian Lindgren might have passed Dvorak as well at some point in the first sector. So can Christian Lindgren stick it to Renault Ritchie? Has he got it under him today to do so? But Dvorak is still pressuring coming through the middle sector, Jesse.
Has Jake Boswell's got a drive-through penalty. That's going to be for being out of position on the initial start. That comes with not knowing the racetrack. That used to be such a problem. One of the racetracks, Kyalami, was a big one because you could get caught out on the starting procedure. And that's exactly what's happened to the 47 Bosmeister car. They will have to come down pit lane here in the next 3 laps to serve that penalty. Mike Redford in the fray, trying to make up positions on Martin Foster. It hasn't worked, and Wojciech Dvorak has actually repassed Lindgren. It looked like at the end of first lap that may have occurred. It did not. Lindgren was able to sneak up the inside of Dvorak in about the 3rd or 4th turn, and now it is well and truly on. All of this to the elation of Miguel Reno Ritchie, who is steaming away at the front of this field while everybody else squabbles over P2. Dvorak doesn't necessarily want to race Lindgren. Lindgren doesn't want to race Dvorak, but Rafael Huel definitely wants to race the both of them. Look at the stack up.
Yeah, so Dvorak being a little bit of I wouldn't say a cork in the bottle, of course, with fantastic pace already in the opening lap or two, but Renault Ritchie now ahead by 3.2 seconds. That's nearly half a second or so in one sector up the road already. Klaus Nyring finds himself in the mid-pack, of course. Ordonez ahead of him, Brocklehurst behind, and we've not seen too much of Brocklehurst, but a relatively safe start for him in his first race. Of course, Andy Boardman in the number 69 Greased Weasel car, pressuring down on him at the moment as we ride on board here. Fantastic scenes with how close Klaus Nyring is getting, of course, in the middle sector, coming up to turn 11 now. Of course, the hairpin that kind of closes in on itself in the second part, and they begin the run to turn 12. The risky corner on the circuit, of course, a giant inside curve and a big bump on the outside. But let's have a look what happened here. Richard Hutchings in the RPMS car, and a just slight touch, Jesse Lee, through the kink of 3, and of course that was enough just to send both cars off to the drivers left and right. Of course, Richard Hutchings in the Falcon car, as Miguel Martins in the other livery car there together. Miguel Martins has managed to P22 so far, and of course, fortunately, Richard Hutchings to the back of the grid at the moment. But of course, mandatory pit stop in the middle of the race, Jesse Lee. It could, switch it on its head. But Brocklehurst coming under immense pressure now from Andy Boardman. Boardman looks to the outside into turn 2. Brocklehurst is blocked by Nyring on the inside. Boardman wants to make it 2 positions, nearly outbraking Klaus Nyring, but alas, he did not. Slots in ahead of Brocklehurst. That's Andy Boardman now up to P7 overall. Still remains, of course, P3 in silver category, and you're gonna have to pay attention, of course, tonight if you are new to watching us here. You've got to keep an eye out on the board and the classifications. A little touch here from Mike Redford. This would be between himself and one of the RPMS drivers, and very close indeed on that one. Heads up driving, I think, to avoid the Porsche of Mike Redford. So
there
that could have been all over very quickly.
Car that got a piece, and I don't know what car that was, a pinkish purplish car, and it got a piece of Redford's car as they went through. And we've seen 2 incidents thus far, and both of them are the car that was on the inside of the contact is the one that got off the absolute worst. We saw that with Hutchins, and now we saw that with Redford as well. Regardless of who was at fault for it, it's not my job to describe or to assess that situation. But my oculars have told me that the car on the inside has lost both times, and that's what you get with a car like this, where you have no aero stability. You make that contact and you're already loaded up, on the suspension. Then you get that issue, and then all of a sudden you're going around. The car on the outside, not necessarily under the same load, and is able to drive away without further incident. Scary moment, maybe food for thought for a lot of these drivers around this racetrack. And just a couple of moments here early on, but there's been some good racing sprinkled in amongst all of that.
Yeah, it's been some good hard racing indeed. Of course, Andy Boardman trying to take 2 positions earlier on, just last lap in turn 2. That was a fantastic attempt at a pass. And just want to touch, of course, on the pit stop tonight. One mandatory pit stop, of course, with the requirements being very specific. Pit window is only 15 minutes in length, and a fixed 25-second refueling will make, of course, for some interesting calls, with tyres only costing an additional 5 seconds. You're going to have to weigh up, can I catch the 5 seconds towards the end of the race? And, of course, Valencia a little bit hard on the tyres, of course, very twisty track, and temperatures tonight a little bit low, 20 degrees in the air, 24 on the track, so we'll see too many tyre troubles, but a few drivers scrubbing in the Pirellis a little bit too hard, a little bit too early in the race. And of course, we know Jesse said all the time on the broadcast with 1.9, raining being the big issue, and Brocklehurst nearly outbraking themselves into the final corner, had to take evasive action to avoid running into the back of Andy Boardman. So very heads up driving from the British young driver there. Mitchell Renard Rodriguez in the 464 is now looking to capitalize on that one. Down the start finish straight they go, but not enough wing trimmed out as was last week at Monza, but he's got a good run this time through turn 2. Looks to the inside of Brocklehurst, but Brocklehurst covers it off very nicely. Didn't have a nose ahead enough to, warrant sticking the move there. So Mendes Rodriguez backing out of it and thinking maybe he can get him another time in the lap. Of course, already making one mistake under pressure. Will Brocklehurst make another, Jesse?
I think it's very possible because you got to probe for weakness here. You're not going to have to look too far. These cars are unstable by nature. They don't have GT3 aero specifications. Heck, they don't even have GT4 aero specifications. The dirty air disturbs them, and just loading up the rear tires, as I mentioned earlier with the incidents thus far, that can get you into trouble as well. Running offline can also be somewhat of an issue. So it's probing for weakness and also not making mistakes yourselves. I've seen several cars go off the racetrack. You start to worry. Track limits, it's only an hour race. It's super easy to get track limits at some places around here in a GT3 car, let alone a Porsche Cup machine. Many other drivers around the racetrack finding themselves in trouble. One of them is Miguel Martins. Drive-through penalty, that given out by the stewards. Our first report from them today. Drive-through penalty for car 62, losing control of their car, causing contact and taking out car number 20.
A very clear-cut case there, I think, for the stewards. It's probably one of the fastest kind of comebacks we've had from a lap 1 incident, I'd say, thus far this season. So, very clear-cut, losing control of your car and taking out another opponent is a little bit frowned upon, of course, with the lack of tyre blankets in these cars. Possibly maybe took cold tyres, just lit up the rears in a corner where the car was already loaded up enough. Tyres just broke away. The collateral damage was the 23 in that one. Raphael Kuhl, meanwhile, still taking it to the back of Christian Lindgren. Of course, these guys are pro and silver, so no real championship points at stake here. Of course, Raphael Kuhl has to pass Dvorak ahead before he gets a sniff at championship points, and Christian Lindgren again has to catch Renault Ritchie before he gains any ahead of him. Andy Boardman, meanwhile, up the inside of Ordonez. Again, this is another switch for overall position, Jesse Lee, that doesn't implicate their championships in class, but Ordonez seems to be struggling tonight. He's sliding back down the grid in that very strong qualifying performance.
It's interesting. Some drivers, they qualify better and maybe they just get rattled in the race. Others, they qualify quite poorly, but they just have a little bit extra racecraft and ability to eke out what their opponents cannot. And get that in races. It takes all kinds. And oh my goodness, are completely slow right there. What on earth happened to Ordonez? It almost looked like they had backed out on purpose. And you see the the back, is that the same Porsche? That's Callum Kerrigan. I believe this car may have been involved in an earlier incident, and oh yeah, that's easy to do as well. Coming into that sharp left-right section, it's easy to unload the car and slide it around, even in a GT3 car, let alone these, and that's exactly what happened. Just got too hard on the brakes while putting too much steering input in it. Callum Kerrigan has a half spin. He ruins the Pirellis on that car.
Yeah, that's not going to be kind to those Pirelli tyres. They're going to be wanting to maybe take a new set when the pit window does open in race. Meanwhile, Ordonez now finds himself under pressure, of course, from Menez Rodriguez. Brocklehurst has managed to break their way free, so he's got a little bit of clear air behind and maybe focus on to the back of Andy Boardman. But Ordonez looks very late on the brakes into turn 8. I believe this is at the end of the straight before, of course, the twisty section as we saw Callum Kerrigan showing us how not to take that one. Like you say, Jesse Lee, the brakes loaded up, of course, all the weight shifted to the front, and the rear will overtake you, of course, in a Porsche, especially with the lack of area that the Cup cars has. Ordonez a little bit wide, Menez Rodriguez equally as wide though, so no run through 13, but he looks into 14. Can he make a move diagonally? Brakes to driver's right to open up the corner, and just not that close enough yet, Jesse Lee. I think a couple more laps and we may see Menez Rodriguez past Ordonez. Ordonez is going to be slipping closer to Joe Dorber.
Yeah, something's going on with Ordonez's car, something up with the setup, the balance of the car, maybe just not feeling it, and has decided to not fight anybody, because he definitely down the, it's not a straight at all going down into Campos, but he definitely just pulled over as far as he could while staying on the racetrack, slowed down, hit the brakes extra, and let Brocklehurst go through without even a fight. Brocklehurst wasn't even really there at the time, and he let him go. And see the wayward nature of the cars, it's so hard to tell. So that is a handling issue and just the product of the car itself and the driver managing all the inputs. But either way, Ordonez definitely slipping back. Menez Rodriguez looking to improve, and he touched on it earlier. A lot of positions changing up here in the top 10, but none of them particularly beneficial for any of the drivers. Just look at our top 6 or 7. All of it, it goes pro silver, pro silver, pro silver. None of them are fighting in class. Of course, there is an overall championship, and Martin Foster goes for a huge day at the beach. Now, how in the world did, excuse me, that's Dvorak, not Martin Foster. Foster maybe a little bit of contact with Dvorak there, but how on earth do you end that far on the beach? Contact, I would assume, with Martin Foster.
Either that or lit the tires up heavily coming out of 5 and just continue the drift all the way to the beach before, of course, matting it to keep yourself out of the gravel. Meanwhile, Raphael Huel for Team Blaupunkt in the number 21, trying to get a move on Christian Lindgren, certainly hassling the back of the pro driver. These silvers are really earning their keep today, I would say. It's been a clear cut so far, Jesse, I'd say at rounds 1 and 2 of who the pro and who the silvers were, but it seems like Valencia has drawn a lot of drivers back into the front running where we wouldn't quite expect to see them, as silver drivers. We expect to see, of course, Nyring, Brocklehurst and Ordonez further up, and of course, Hill, Dvorak and Boardman a little bit further down. So we have a kind of white split with a grey split and a red split. But, certainly not the case tonight, as Christian Lindgren sliding the car very heavily out of turn 6 onto what is essentially the back straight, should we say, going down in turn 8. Of course, that's not going to be good for the Pirelli tyres, but it just shows how much Lindgren is trying to push on to escape the jaws of Raphael Huel behind.
Well, by the way, just to confirm, that was not contact with Martin Foster that caused the other car of Dvorak to spin. Callum Kerrigan is going to lose grip and then pull the car over to the side of the road, and that may be day done for the number 28 of Callum Kerrigan, being a hell of a task here. But just to confirm, no contact with Martin Foster earlier on. That was a solo incident for Dvorak. That section, if I had to guess what actually happened at the curb, and then just sort of speared off into the gravel. And that is, of course, what the gravel is there for. Hitting to the wall did its job, certainly on that case. Meanwhile, the fight still going on here. Ordonez still holding on to the position in front of Menez Rodriguez. Menez Rodriguez would quite like to get through here and maybe take the fight to the podium contenders in the silver class. Ordonez not yielding here in any way. It hasn't really, after giving up the spot to Brocklehurst, hasn't really fallen off the back of him, John, as we might have expected. They've all just been sort of steady where they are for the time being, and Boardman not going away, living in the mirrors of, Brocklehurst living in the mirrors of Andy Boardman. Anyway, everything's sort of settled here for the time being.
Yeah, it's kind of entered that I wouldn't say a stalemate, but it has entered that area where, of course, drivers have kind of spread out. They found their feet, they found the pace, tires and brakes, and everything are up to temperature. Meanwhile, Joe Dorber on the offensive on Gaikin, darting left and right, trying to make the rebound racing car as big in the mirrors of the 127 as he possibly can through turns 7 and 8. Dorber to the inside, of course, gets the better exit out of turn 8, and Roman Gaikin down a position. Of course, overall honours at stake here, not really affecting either of their championship, of course, with Dorber being the pro car, Gaikin being the silver car. Meanwhile, Raphael Hill still chomping at the bit with Christian Lindgren. He still wants to find a way past, doesn't he? And down the main straight, just not close enough to take advantage of any of the slipstream being given off, of course, by the Sim brothers. Number 48 down into turn 1. You see Callum Kerrigan there on the left-hand side of your screen, parked in his box. So going to call it a day. Very unfortunate 15 minutes into a race. But sometimes, Jesse, you just have those races that just don't go your way, and you just don't feel quite, one-to-one with the circuit. A lot of drivers at Barcelona felt that, but did continue to push on. And Valencia maybe being Callum Kerrigan's least favorite track, maybe in ACC. Like you said earlier, Jesse, of course, it's the newest track, and it was my mind has gone completely blank there. Jake Boswell, of course, never driven the circuit before, and of course having to pick up his track medals tonight. So Callum Kerrigan in the same boat. Meanwhile, Lindgren has pulled out of a gap, and pulled out of a gap is this man here, Renault Ritchie, 4.2 seconds to the good. Not the initial escape, Jesse, but like Dvorak's keeping him a bit within check now. The 340 has some clear air around him.
Sort of settled in a little bit, hasn't it? Renault Ritchie out in front of the field right now, doing everything they can for the Boomer squad. I can get behind that. Getting old, getting up there, John. But the 911 looking like they're continuing their remarkable run in the pro class. Nothing adverse here. The car looks completely under control, and Jeffrey looking good for another win, for at least for right now. But it has stabilized a little bit, like you said. Voce Dvorak in second place, forcing back here. It's the pass maybe that we were finally looking on. Does something happen around here? Donez over the curb. Oh, a couple of extra bits of sawing at the wheel around the Champy Herrera's corner. Well, of course, that's the silver driver through. It took a few more laps than we would expected it to have done, as Rodriguez is through and one step closer to Boardman for the potential fight for the podium. But yeah, going back to the front, of course, very interesting indeed that it all sort of stabilized. Hasn't stabilized too much here. Close quarters racing down to the one. That's going to send Ibiza Racer off into the yonder. Luckily, that's an entirely tarmacked and painted area. And here comes Mike Redford. Redford going up the inside. It's a BOGO. Buy one, get one free, and he's done it. He's gone from 21st up to 19th, and he didn't have to do anything. Excellent job. And look at the slides out of the cars behind. Here comes back Ibiza Racer. Ibiza Racer has got the car back under control, and they've been able to take the position back from Foster. Foster's slide gets Racer their position back. Mike Redford still goes 2 for 1. Excellent racing, all things told, between those drivers. They slip sliding all over the place, but somehow are able to get it done quite cleanly. Joe Dalber starting from dead last. He started from pit lane during night owl. He started from the back today, so slightly less of a disadvantage, but you can also agree, quite the disadvantage regardless. Dalber up to 15th, inside the top 15 for the first time, putting on pressure from John Razor right now. And the question now becomes, John, and I'll ask you, how far can Dauber realistically get? I think a top 10, a sensible option. Can he get in the top 5?
I'd say a top 10 is probably realistic. I mean, a top 5, maybe if the front runners clash or have issues like we saw obviously last week at Monza with Nick Babin running out of fuel after the race went an extra lap. I mean, anything can happen in Cup car racing, and that's the fantastic kind of format that we have here, of course, in one-make challenges as well. Cars that aren't always chosen by drivers. Some of these, of course, not familiar with the Cup car platform. We have run it a few times here at RCI, but maybe this is the first time some of them are driving the 992 in a kind of serious competitive arena, shall we say. A lot of the time with new cars, we will take them offline as Menez Rodriguez outbrakes himself into turn 8. That allows Juan Pablo Ordóñez onto the back of him through, of course, the twisty left-right or into the hairpin of 11. But yeah, back to my point, of course, most of these guys would have tried the cars offline maybe. And, you know, coming into a competitive kind of setting, you know, it really kind of upsets you as a driver. It puts you places where you're not used to being. Of course, Joe Dorber now coming back under fire from Roman Geiken. He's not happy being passed by the 777 to the inside of 12. This is a very tight corner
dangerous
to go side by side, but just about clearing each other there as Joe Dorber came across the back of Roman Geiken. They inches between them as Dorber on the brakes, losing the rear into 14. Geiken had to back out of that one, somehow gets it drawn up in time and makes the move stick, Jesse Lee. I'm not sure. Rebound racing car. Let's have a race replay here.
He
of
didn't
what happened,
leave
of
the
course.
track. That's the thing. It looked like he was going to overshoot by a mile, but he doesn't look.
Absolutely big armfuls of opposite locks. He wrestles the car in and under Geiken. Very heads-up driving from Geiken and soaring at the wheel, even on the exit. Somehow managed to keep it in between the white lines. This is fantastic racing, Jesse, and we're only about 22 minutes in.
Geiken is not going to appreciate that at all. And in fact, I believe Joe Dauber gave the spot back. Oh, he didn't do it voluntarily. He got loose again under the back of another car, and that will allow Geiken back through. Geiken does eventually convert this pass in the Herreras part of the racetrack. That's very tight right-hander uphill. So he has done it. Joe Dauber is going to have to go back to work. He's going to have to do it, and hopefully a little bit cleaner this time. Geiken might be playing with fire a little bit. He saw Joe Dauber get uncontrollably loose, despite the fact that he was able to control it, Joe Dauber. It looked uncontrollable to a driver. Geiken playing with fire a little bit, but taking on the challenge after the near scrape a lap or so ago. Dauber had the position taken, got loose, he gave it up, and now Eraser, who he was working on at the time, has scampered away again. A little bit of a reset here. Does he try the move again in the final turn? He doesn't get nearly close enough. He takes a better apex, but has nowhere to go, because when these cars especially, once you've set your turning angle, you can't change it. That is your arc into and off of the corner. Doing anything else might upset the car dramatically. So Geiken very smartly covering the apex of Campos right there, keeping Dauber behind him. This turned into an interesting fight. I don't think we would have ever expected to see this. Some very close race. And again, John, Joe didn't mean to run in there and get Geiken like he did, right? That's not, you're never trying to do that. Oh, and here we go again. Geiken gets a little squirrely onto the brakes, and Joe Dauber goes back through.
Yeah, so I don't think Joe Dauber had any malicious intent, of course, up the inside of 14 just a few laps ago. Just slightly misjudged it. I mean, you know, all drivers are humans. We all make mistakes. It's how, of course, you learn from those mistakes that progresses you as a driver. The race replay we were shown by our broadcaster Stewie was actually how Dauber came into that position, nearly ran into the back of a racer, and that allowed Geiken to catch back up and, of course, make the move through turn 11 to 12, and that's where it all kind of unfolded. So if Dauber was a little bit more cautious on the brakes behind a racer, he might not found himself in that position to begin with. Eagle-eyed viewers would have noticed pit lane is open. 14 minutes on the clock. Raphael Huell is the first to blink today.
You see what Huell did?
I didn't.
He came in slow on purpose. Not want to speed on pit lane. Normally, you're maxing it to the line. He was down a kilometer or so coming in before he was on the limit.
They probably very sensible. I mean, of course, Valencia, very fast entry. Of course, you come out of the last turn, hitting third gear, nearly into fourth probably before you slam on the brakes to try and get it scrubbed down to the pit limiter. Richard Hutchings comes out of the lane to complete his mandatory stop. So first on the board for the Falcon Motorsports, number 23. Not had the best of starts to this race, but sticking in it anyway, because of course there may be some small amounts of points on the table for some drivers. He comes out just ahead, I believe, of Dvorak. I'm not sure if it's the AM or the silver Dvorak. It is indeed the AM Dvorak, so find himself going a lap down to P17. Meanwhile, Raphael Huell has cleared his mandatory stop, indicated, of course, by the green square on the timing tower. So if you are new to viewing ACC and you're wondering what all the timing tower information means, the orange number 1 means there is a mandatory stop for that driver to clear. Once it has been cleared and, of course, met the requirements of tonight's mandatory stop, which is hit within the 15-minute pit window, fixed refueling time of 25 seconds. So when you add 1 litre, 100 litres, it's still 25 seconds. and changing tires will cost you an additional 5 seconds, which is all, of course, up to the drivers. So trying to switch it up a little bit, have that varying strategies between drivers. Normally, typically, Jesse, in the 1 hour sprints, everybody runs it to the end of the pit window, hits on the last lap, and you have a very kind of boring and predictable race. But or slapping a smaller window in the middle forces everybody in, maybe when they don't quite want to be, and of course opens up drivers to maybe battles that they wouldn't normally have seen. As Ollie Brocklehurst has found some pace somewhere, he is now on to the back of Andy Boardman. Of course, Menez Rodriguez still lurking in the mirror, albeit he has dropped off the back of the number 10 ever so slightly. So maybe Menez Rodriguez overdriving the car at the beginning, struggling to get the pace in the midfield, but Boardman backing it through turn 6 there, before rounding it into, of course, turn 5 before rounding it into 6 here, the left-hander. And you know, fantastic scenes at Valencia. I didn't think it would be a circuit that would promote, you know, great racing like this. But every time we've come here, Jesse, we've always had fantastic battles and passes. I mean, just look at World Tour a couple of months ago. That was a brilliant opening race here. So Valencia has certainly changed my mind on the quality of racing that we get here at RCI.
Yeah, I feel like I had the opposite opinion from the get-go. I knew that race number 1 in any series, doesn't matter if it's a brand new track, it's always a bit sloppy and a bit messy. And I felt like there was a lot of side-by-side racing, and there was a lot of wheel-to-wheel contact as well. Not necessarily bad or good. To me, that typically bodes well that a track is raceable most of the time. And this has certainly proven to be that. Even in these cars that are tough to drive, you're seeing a lot of that raceability going on the racetrack today. And that it's been like that for all the series that we've brought here. You can, we saw it in the World Tour round. You can get stuck too, apparently, side by side, racing somebody. You absolutely hemorrhage lap time when you do that around here. But it is a very raceable track. It's a track where maybe good at one end, but you can be absolutely horrible at the other, and that gives somebody else an advantage in a certain sector, and you can try to exploit that. It's just a lovely place to be. It races well. It's a fun track for the most part. I know a lot of times these Porsche Cup drivers, when they're done with their race, they're like, hey, that was fun. I am absolutely tired. And I mean, it's no small wonder. All you need to do is look at the hands of some of the drivers in these races. They make it look academic, but I promise you it is anything but. Joe Dauber for Rebound Racing. He's rebounding from intentionally starting dead last. Now back to the back of John Eraser. All these cars, of course, still have their pit stop to do. Andy Boardman has just thundered down the pit lane in front of us, yielding that podium position in the silver class. Then he will join the likes of Raphael Huell that have completed their stop. You mentioned something, John, and I just want to elaborate on that. Somebody at home was probably thinking, how does making the pit window smaller make the strategy better? Well, simply because of what John explained. When you force people to do something contrarian to the strategy that they want to do something that they're not comfortable with, or make them make a quicker decision, it can impact their decision making. It can also impact what you do. You have less leeway. Let's say Joe Dauber normally, like, he would have come in early perhaps to get into clean air. Couldn't do that. Has to race these drivers out. That changes the way you think about it. But of course, Joe's not really concerned about that. Otherwise, he would have came in as early as possible to get out from behind these cars. He realizes he has a pace advantage. He's doing it the hard way on the racetrack. But a lot of drivers would just come in, get the stop done, hopefully be in clean air, and not lose any time. But you kind of box people in, changes strategy, changes how you run the race, and that's how that can make it quite tight. And it certainly has in this series. Every race we've had thus far had a dash to the finish line. Miguel Martins for DCC Motorsport comes to the pit lane, also dabbing at 48K before on the limiter. Everybody here, I wouldn't call it gun shy necessarily, John. They're just being practical into the pit lane here.
Yeah, they're just being a bit sensible, aren't they? They're knowing, of course, the penalty that waits the other side if they are caught speeding into the pit lane, and just, you know, trying to stop that in a sprint race. I mean, hefty drive through penalty for a lot of time in a sprint race. There's not enough time to kind of come back from that, as we see Joe Dauber with a fellow Rebound Racing teammate ahead. Of course, Roskam in his inaugural race this season, the number 96 Belgian driver, has been away for work commitments, and now finds himself in at the deep end in round 3. Everybody's kind of adjusted to the cars and got used to how they behave. rocked up and said, you know what, I can stick it to you guys as well. So a little bit of team audit here with Roscam giving way to Joe Dorber into the pit lane to make some clear air. Of course, going back to your point on the pit stop as well, putting the pit window in the middle and making it only 15 minutes, you've got to manage your fuel load. Do you want a lighter car at the start of the race, so when you come to the refueling window, you're a little bit heavier towards the end when you might not be battling people or trying to make up ground? Or do you try and load your car up at the beginning, go all the way to the end of the pit window, have a really light car when maybe some people have just fueled theirs to try and make up some time as well? As we see Raphael Huell in the number 21 making a pass on Jake Boswell. Again, that is 4 category honors, so both drivers in the silver, although Boswell's still yet to pit, so it's a null and void move because come in anyway on that one. Pit lane looking very busy now. We've got the likes of Klaus Nyring, Christian Lindgren, Brocklehurst down the lane, Callum Kerrigan, of course, in his box, Roscam's in, Huell, Boswell, and I believe a racer flashed up there as Klaus Nyring comes out in P12, I believe, if the live delta is right. It is Tim Ireland just ahead there, still yet to take his pit stop. Drive through for Brocklehurst, though, the number 10, probably caught speeding into the pit lane, Jesse.
Yeah, I would assume so. Either that or it was track limits. Either way, I don't think stewards have had their say on anything with his name in. In fact, very few reports coming in. The stewards see a battle on the racetrack here. The stewards quite calm here today. Only a warning for car 127 out of position impeding the 62 during the race start, and a no further action. Car 95 does not give enough room to the 44. The contact makes him spin. That's considered a self-solving issue and a racing incident between car number 4 and number 5. No contact found there, despite the fact that their automatic tool reported something. Did not find it, so they reported out, but nothing doing there. Raphael Huell finds themselves in a heck of a fight here, fighting these drivers. Of course, that's Christian Lindgren, and this is very interesting. How bad of a pit stop must that have been for Lindgren?
Yeah, absolutely. So he got it done on the track, though, Raphael Huell. We said it earlier, of course, going side by side through numerous corners. Managed to find his way past Christian Lindgren, and if anything, Raphael Huell had a slower stop. He was 1 minute 8.6 from entry to exit. Christian Lindgren 1 minute 7.4, so about 1.2 seconds quicker for Lindgren, but still not enough. And of course, the no tire blankets, Jesse Lee. Of course, if you pit earlier in the window, by the time everybody else comes out of their stops, they're going to be on stone cold tires, and your tires are going to be lovely and warm all the way up to pressure. They're going to be at their peak optimum performance, and you're almost going to sail past some of these guys, of course, with the graining that happens in 1.9. You don't want to push your tires too early if they're cold. If you've elected to take tires, and looking up and down the timing board, nobody really with a big advantage on time. I mean, Brocklehurst was a 1 minute 12 down the lane on his stop, so that kind of signifies tires. Of course, if you bear in mind, Christian Lindgren with a 1 minute 7, add 5 seconds onto that, it becomes about a 1 minute 12. So Brocklehurst looking like the only car that has taken tires. Kevin Boss with a lengthy stop, a 1 minute 22, possibly some damage earlier on for Kevin, because that's more than just tires, Jesse. That's 10 seconds of damage as well.
Yeah, my apologies. It was actually Voce Dvorak that had the worst stop. There was about a second to 1.2 seconds the gap there, about anywhere between 9/10 to over a second of a gap as those cars came into the pit lane, and Lindgren now in front of Dvorak, and now Huell in the lead of the cars that have pitted for silver. I suspect they might cycle out as the overall leader in the silver class. Tim Ireland brings the Syndedelic baby car to pit lane, and for all the cars taking it slightly easy into the lane today, Tim Ireland wasn't one of them.
Tim Ireland, maybe with the most committed entrance to the pit lane. Maybe we should make that a little bonus award, maybe every round, who can get closest to the pit speed before they, of course, push that boundary. Dvorak in an area currently where he wouldn't want to be, the silver driver. Dvorak, this is, of course, not the Am Dvorak. We've got 2 of them here tonight, again in the same livery, making it very tricky for us up here. But he is in the battle essentially with Christian Lindgren and Raphael Huell. He's had a bit of a stinker of a stop, 1 minute 10.6 down the lane. Of course, not enough for tires, I would say, Jesse, not unless he's aiming for a 1 minute 5 without the tires. That's a very quick stop in and out. So I can only assume in waylaid, maybe fumbling the starter, maybe a bit too cautious on entry, or just not alert enough on exit, taking off the limiter. So big chunk of time lost. He's behind the battling cars, not where you want to be. Meanwhile, Tim Ireland comes out of the
I
pit
would have
lane, of
lost a
course.
bet.
Nice clear air around Tim. No drive-through penalty for him. So really pushing the envelope tonight on the pit limiter. Meanwhile, Dvorak still line of stern with Christian Lindgren, although he looks for a sniff into turn 14. He's come from a long way back. There's a slight rub. Lindgren goes wide, sideways over the curb, comes back on, tries to pinch Dvorak across to the left-hand side of the circuit. They didn't touch. It was just enough width between them, but I don't think Christian Lindgren is going to be happy with that dive bomb.
No, perhaps not. Christian Lindgren, though, of course, didn't really fire off as quick in this run. By the way, Rena Ritchie in and out of the pit lane, didn't really lose the lead. Matthew Kingston Lee and the rest of the non-pitters into the lane this time, including Martin Foster. They could have risked it and done another lap. Nobody trying to do that here today. Everybody playing it slightly conservative, coming in with about 2 minutes left to go. Keep in mind, about a 1 minute 33, 34 lap time around this joint. They could have tried it. Nobody did. And again, I think that goes back to the majority of the cars not really testing the limits of pit lane here. They're not testing the track limits here. They're not really trying to test any limit here. They're just trying to survive. This is the epitome of racing the racetrack. There are tracks where you can race the race itself. Some tracks you have to race the racetrack. This is definitely one of them. Bathurst comes to mind about racing the racetrack as well. This is one of those, you find yourself in a battle, then obviously you have to deal with that. But more than anything, you cannot beat yourself. A lot of drivers realizing that, not doing that here today. Joe Dahlberg up to P11 with that pass for Rebound Racing. He's almost there, back to the top 10. I say back to the top 10. He was never in the top 10 tonight, but almost into the top 10. Here it is, the pit stop times for all of the top 22 or so cars. We suspect a minute 5 is right around the time that they'll be looking for.
Yeah, it's about a 1 minute 5, 1 minute 6 is like the ideal window. We see a lot of 1 minute 6s on the board. I mean, 7s and 8s probably for fumbling starters, maybe not being as prepared as you should be for a pit stop. Of course, Brocklehurst took tyres on his stop. He was a 1 minute 12, although it does show his drive-through penalty, of course, being a 31.799. You see there hovering over, of course, 1 minute 12.999 for the actual stop for the mandatory clearance there. So set of tyres on Brocklehurst's car, everybody else on old Pirellis. So keep an eye on the number 10, see how much ground he can make up. Of course, Redford being the next car ahead of him before he even gets to a pro car. The next pro car in line, Joe Dorber, for championship points. So Brocklehurst got a very big ask on him this evening. Meanwhile, we've got a little bit of RCI staff on staff action here. Jake Boswell and Tim Ireland into the last corner. Boswell carrying a lot of speed, and Tim Ireland nearly stopping on the apex. Meanwhile, Ibiza Racer behind is going to be getting first class seats to all of this. Let's have a race replay from Tim Ireland's diffuser cam. How close?
Oh man!
Very, very close from
the
Jake
correct
Boswell
answer,
there.
chat, was yes.
Yes, all of the closeness, I would say, could probably fit just about a very thin sheet of paper between the diffuser, of course, and the front bumper of Jake Boswell's car. And the touring car styled it through into Tim Ireland's rear there. But fight still continues through Sector 1. Tim Ireland certainly putting up a fight there, proving that he's definitely done some practice in the Porsche Cup car. And as Stevenson, I think, is lurking in our chat, and a mistake there from Jake Boswell, but equally a mistake from Tim Ireland on corner exit. And Ibiza Racer is going to put himself in the middle of this RCI fight in the number 808. You see they're going up the inside in 7, finds his way towards Tim Ireland into turn 8, nearly running up the inside of him, but not close enough to make that move stick. Meanwhile, Boswell's going to have to pray now that Ibiza Racer can get through Tim Ireland, maybe can open the door and then slip the number 47 up the inside, and we can have a good old staff on staff fight once again.
Well, we had a plot twist here in the booth. Mike Redford has seemingly confirmed that they took tires. Now, the interesting thing about that is Redford claims to have taken tires, and they ran a 1.6, just like most did, on pit lane. Almost everybody did that. In fact, I can't think of a single car that didn't run a 1 minute 6 to 1 minute 7 something down pit lane here Does that mean if Redford's claiming they took tires, if that is correct, that means that everyone took tires here tonight?
Yeah, maybe we're looking at it the wrong way. Maybe we're assuming nobody has taken tyres when in reality the whole field has taken tyres and Brocklehurst's stop was just very, very slow in general. It just so happened that, of course, 1 minute 6 and 7 plus 5 equals about 1 minute 12. So the maths kind of added up, but maybe in reality 1 minute 6 is what we should have been looking at. We say 4 tyres for everyone. So it looks like the whole field, in theory, should be on new tyres. And just want to comment, of course, Mike Redford still racing in P16, but active in the YouTube chat, Jesse.
Yeah, absolutely insane. Mike, you're absolutely insane. I know you can probably hear us because you got us on the background. You're making fun of us. You're insane. Thank you for the information update, but beyond that, incredible stuff. Here is the leader of the race. You haven't seen him a lot. You haven't had to see him a lot. Just know he's out there. Jeffrey McGill, Reno Ritchie, in the Boomer Squad 911 leading the race. Ibiza Racer has driven off of the racetrack. Was that contact or self-inflicted? Let's see. Remember, was running in the middle of the RCI Stewart sandwich. And what has happened to this car? Everything's fine here. Oh, it's another one of these. It is contact with Tim Ireland. Jake Boswell able to get through. Racer does the smart thing and just ditches it off the racetrack instead of trying to rejoin a congested part of the circuit. But that is unfortunate for the 808. Did the right thing, but just same thing we've seen many times. Just getting in there a little too deep. I wonder what that could be. Just getting the braking wrong, perhaps.
Yeah, maybe just, out-braking themselves, definitely. Maybe brake temperatures getting a little bit too hot and just committing themselves to brake fade. Jake Boswell to the inside in turn 1, although Tim Ireland's going to use all of the track limits and some more to see if he can mount the defense, but I don't think he can. All the meanwhile, of course, Renault Ritchie in the background is witnessing this and thinking, I don't want to be a part of this. Please move out of the way, and Tim Ireland does so. Through turns 2 and 3, they go, of course, into 4. Jake Boswell now going to be the next under blue flags. Of course, GT racing style, blue flags do not mean instantly yield. Some drivers do choose to do so, of course, being very sensible. If they know the pace difference is quite large, then it just makes sense to. But of course, no forced yielding, essentially, like you'd see in Formula 1 and Open Wheel Series. It is the faster car does have to find their way safely around the slower car, and of course, the slower car should hold a predictable line and remain predictable at all times. So Renault Ritchie very well exercised in that. Numerous endurance races to his name. He's dealt with traffic on a lot of occasions, so shouldn't be a stranger to it, even in a sprint format. John Aracer still glued to the back of a Rebound racing car, but it's not Joe Daubers this time. It's Roskamp in the number 96. And of course, Roskamp being quote unquote an AM, currently leading the field of AMs 2 positions ahead of a silver driver, and he's even ahead of a pro driver. Of course, Brocklehurst with his drive-through penalty earlier on has shuffled him down order into P17. So maybe Tim Ireland, I think, Jesse, might need to do a little bit more reclassification come next week.
I don't know if they'll do a reclassification this deep into the championship, John. I think this was the last race you would consider that. I think everyone, I could be wrong about that. I don't know what Tim Ireland makes his own championship, but it just seems a little bit too late. What is this, a 6-round, 5-round championship? So, yeah, it's a 5-round championship. So I don't know if you would be messing about with that for the time being, but this is an interesting fight for P2. It doesn't necessarily pay you points in your championship, of course. Silver on Pro, but still, there is an overall championship as well to consider. So not only are they racing, you could technically win 2 trophies here if you won your class and the overall championship. And Reno Ritchie looks like a shoe-in to do that. But the likes of Huell and Klaus Nyring, is very possible that they could change positions themselves in this. This is a question from the chat from Ash. What happened to Callum Kerrigan? We're not entirely sure, as Raphael Huell stays in front there, but not exactly sure what happened to Callum Kerrigan. They had a couple of half spins and then just slid the car and parked it. I wonder if maybe they just had enough of the race, didn't make it to pit stop window, and parked the car. So somewhat unsure on that one. The car didn't look to be handling the best, but necessarily hit anything either. The car still sitting in the pit lane, by the way, hasn't taken for part. Dvorak has received a 5-second penalty, and that one does show up on the stewarding report. 5-second penalty for car 340, an overtake with contact position not return. That was, of course, with the 48 in a racing incident between the 141 and the 47. John, they did make contact earlier on.
Yeah, they must. Maybe we just didn't quite catch it, but of course the Eagle Eye Steward catching it indeed and deeming it a racing incident, of course, was fair in jest. You know, I think Tim Ireland and Jake Boswell, none of it was intentional. It was just one of those things. Joe Dorber still on the back of Matthew Kingston Lee, of course, the greatest surname in sim racing, according to our Jesse Lee up here in the comms box, and nothing to be had there. Meanwhile, Andy Boardman finds himself still with Menes Rodriguez within earshot, just behind him. Of course, going through the first sector with Dvorak's, of course, 5-second penalty. Could they be in earshot to take any more position? I don't think so. 7 seconds do the good. That's onto the back of Christian Lindgren, and then Lindgren has another 1.5 seconds. So they're essentially 8.5 seconds roughly clear of Dvorak at the moment. So they're really going to have to get their foot down as Ibiza Racer gets out of the way, allows the lap traffic to come through on that one, and he heads up driving again. And now Ordonez has to get past Ibiza Racer as well, and really fair that, of course, he should, in theory, yield to one Pablo Ordonez into the hairpin to go. Goes very wide, leaves the door open up the inside, and again, excellent kind of driving display, should we say, of how to deal with traffic. Of course, both parties are working together and reading the scenario very well indeed through turn 11 and through 12 they go. It looks like ahead though. Menes Rodriguez getting very close to Boardman. I think there might have been a touch there, Jesse. Boardman's rear end did wiggle ever so slightly into 14. Stewie confirming it in our ears with his broadcasting tool. So Stewards might be looking into that one, although no position was changed. Of course, no ground gained or lost really. But let's have a race replay. Of course, coming through 13, you can just see how fast Menes Rodriguez was off 12. Boardman went to cover, and as he went to cover, brakes. Menes Rodriguez not really reacting in time, but kind of all's fair and well. Of course, neither driver losing out particularly on that one, although damaged bumpers and the Porsche parts bin definitely being raided after the race tonight.
It's quite interesting there to see that. It definitely looked like they went down to the inside, did Andy Boardman, and in an attempt to defend, which is a very common thing you see in racing. You can choose the line you take into the corner. You can't change your line, obviously, but you can choose your line. That's what he did, and what just ended up happening was Menes Rodriguez went in there and just gave him a little bit of tap. As soon as Menes Rodriguez realized he was going to make contact, he just sort of backed out and went as wide as possible to curve off some of that speed. Kevin Boss here in a hot battle today. To see him on the racetrack on one of his days off, the Wheelie Slow Racing team representing here in the Porsche Cup, getting some passes done.
Yeah, great to see staff, of course, getting a chance to race here at RCI, and of course, you have a very packed calendar coming up at the moment. Of course, this week, Wednesday, will be our next event on the calendar. The Team Solo Championship head down under to Bathurst for their round 4, with RCI Esports Yellow taking victory at round 3 from RCI Esports Blue, and MRT KTM still lurking in the top 3, bottom step of the podium. Friday, of course, on RCI TV, we'll see our GT Sprint Season 12 head to Laguna Seca. Christopher Streppen won from Kevin Tutik and Jordan Daly. Silver honours last time taken by Strahina Juvelic and Snudin Flood, and Ted Edwards in third as well. And Saturday this week, we see a break for Night Owl as we, of course, continue the World Tour. Round 3 follows suit, of course, to where Wednesday is. We are heading to the mountain. 6 hours of non-stop racing. RCI Esports Blue took victory at Monza from SPHE Motorsport and Thomas Enger Sim Racing. And of course, Night Owl will return on the following Saturday, that's the 14th. And also a big announcement last week, I believe, at RCI. We're heading back iRacing. Of course, I believe we're kicking off at Formula 1600 at Virginia on October 12th. That's this week, I believe. Or next week, sorry. We then begin the Legends Cup on October 19th before heading off to the Charlotte 150 on October 28th. And lastly, we've got some good old multi-class in the form of the iRacing Road Championship. That's with GT4s and MX-5 Cups, both mingling on circuit. That begins on November 9th. And meanwhile, Joe Dorber running very wide into the hairpin. I think he's done the same what he did with John Eraser, maybe just not braking in time and putting himself out of road. And Meanwhile, Matthew Kingston-Lee and Richard Phillips have now come into this fight as well. And that's Xiao Manzo behind in the other RPMS car.
He's going
So it's
for
a
it.
bit of a RPMS kind of sandwich going on here, but Rebound Racing to the inside. And Joe Dorber finds his way back past them as they go into flying formation. Meanwhile, Menes Rodriguez up the inside into turn 2. Andy Boardman's going to have to try the long way round, and he can't get the drive off the corner, and that's going to expose him to Ordonez behind in P8. Of course, this is for silver honors between Boardman and Menes Rodriguez. Meanwhile, Ordonez in the pro category is just sitting behind, chilling, having a great view of the fight at the moment, and I think Andy Boardman has done just about enough into turn 6. They go chopping off the inside. Fantastic racing. We said it earlier on, Jesse Lee. Side-by-side racing around numerous corners of Valencia is possible, and we've seen that numerous times tonight.
Certainly have. Ordonez is able to somehow use the car there as a pick and get in between the two of them. Again, he's trying to do this as gently as possible and get through these cars, and I wonder if Andy Boardman will hold him up here at all. Again, there's an overall championship. I doubt the drivers are thinking too much about that right now. Andy Boardman's definitely more worried about Menes Rodriguez than Ordonez. So what do you do in this situation? If I was Boardman and I found a good spot to do it, I would just sort of try and let Ordonez sneak through, especially with a little bit of a gap now back to Menes Rodriguez. And look at this, down to the inside, the 464 Menes Rodriguez is, and they're still going at it, nose to tail. Ordonez still trying to figure out exactly what is going on and how to get through these two. Looks chill right now, actually. Looks like they're almost complacent in allowing this battle to sort itself out. Not making contrarian or aggressive moves to get out from behind them, but this is a live look inside Juan Pablo Ordonez's car. Keep in mind, this is a pro car looking at a fight for the podium spots in the silver class. So Ordonez, I think, has decided here, well, I'm not going to get involved unless I absolutely have to. If they give me an opening, I'm going to take it. But beyond that, I don't really want to interfere. Not as aggressive as some others might expect. But the Odox Motorsports car looks good. I think it has the speed to compete here. I just don't think he wants to get involved.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a very good observation there, Jesse. Of course, ahead of him, he's got Christian Lindgren, about now kind of 12 seconds near enough to the good. He's not realistically going to catch Lindgren in the next 7.5 minutes. And behind, he's got Matthew Kingston-Lee, of course, 15 seconds, nearly 16 seconds to the good. And he's fighting with Joe Dorber. So Ordonez doesn't really have a lot to gain, nothing to lose. So might as well just stay line of stern and, of course, watch this fight unfold in front of him and provide us with some great onboard views of the fight. And Menes Rodriguez not getting the good run through turn 12 like he did last time on Boardman. So line of stern, they will go, but Boardman outbreaks himself into 14. That allows Menes Rodriguez up the inside, but he lights up the rear tires. Menes Rodriguez can't get that Porsche in a straight line, squirrels his way out of 14, and the move was there, Jesse. He nearly had it. We said it earlier, he jumped on the throttle too early. The peaky NA engine just spun up the rear wheels one way, then the other, up a few gears, and away he went. But fantastic battling once again. There's still just under 7 minutes to go. This isn't done yet, Jesse.
Folks, I want you, here's some homework for you tonight. I want you to come here at Valencia in these cars. I want to see you do that. Menes Rodriguez min-maxing the steering inputs of that car. Robot-like consistency to save it, and somehow, even with scrubbing the tires as bad as the Sim Brothers racing car must have done, he's still right back onto the back of Andy Boardman. While that's going on, thank you to Ash Bibby for the £1.99 donation to the channel. On set, director's chair, Stewie doing an excellent job with the directing, but appreciate that, Ash Bibby. Of course, any donations given to RCI TV goes back into the server cost of the events that we put on. And, of course, Ash has donated several pounds worth at this point. And believe it or not, probably pays for weeks of servers, something like that. I don't know the exact figures of that, but I do know it goes directly back into paying for servers so that we can do. So thank you, thank you, thank you, Ash Bibby, and anyone else who becomes a channel member or donates as well. Meanwhile, we're not the ones putting on the show today. These drivers are. Fast hands required. Excellent skill drifting these cars off of these corners. Normally, you see a GT car do that, John, and you go, well, they're damaging the tires. And yes, they are doing that to these cars. The difference is these are not downforce dependent race cars, so it still hurts the tires, but you don't notice it quite as much.
Yeah, you certainly don't notice it quite as much of the cup cars. So the cars kind of become a little bit looser towards the end of the stint, but still, drivable and workable. You're not losing copious amounts of time by doing it, and sometimes even maybe gaining time if you can find a way to kind of slide it through certain corners. Christian Lindgren getting very close to Dvorak here, but again, Lindgren, nothing to gain, nothing really to lose. He's got to catch Nyring ahead, 5 seconds to the good. He does get past Dvorak, but don't see that happening. He's just going to wait for the 5-second penalty, I say, to deal its hand at the end. Shuffle Dvorak down a place, and of course Lindgren up a place overall. Again, not for category honours. Lindgren in pro, Dvorak in silver, and meanwhile another fight not for category honours either. Joe Dorber trying to find his way past Matthew Kingston Lee. We said a top 10 earlier on in the broadcast, and Lindgren through the inside of Dvorak into turn 14. Move signed, sealed, and delivered. Maybe Dvorak knowing that the 5-second penalty is coming again, not fighting it too hard. Got a little bit wrong out of 12. We said it in the qualifying lap, Jesse. 12 has a nasty bump on the outside, and Dvorak hitting that in just the right place to throw the car offline through 13, and that allowed Lindgren with a fantastic run up the inside into 14. But again, knowing the 5-second penalty is coming, don't really want to detriment yourself anymore. Stewards have already looked at you once. Do you really want to get involved with them again? Could be an even bigger penalty, and then you may see Andy Boardman going past you on the leaderboard as well. So probably some heads-up driving from Dvorak in silver there. Realised when I explained the lovely calendar we had this week at RCI and all the wonderful events we have coming up, I didn't tell anyone where to go or where to sign up for them. You can, of course, head on over to our website. That's racerci.com. It's been cycling around in the bottom left-hand side of your screen, of course, with all of our partners as well, including AK Esports, driver61.com, Fanatec, Digital Motorsports, and Go Setups, of course, helping us out here at RCI. And of course, everybody at home, welcome on in. Thank you if you are just joining us. You've missed a wonderful race. I suggest go and rewind the VOD and watch it again, because battles from the get-go, Jesse. And it's finally only just started to calm down, I would say. But again, Andy Boardman and Menez Rodriguez still going at each other, and Menez Rodriguez is running out of time now, Jesse.
Certainly running out of time. You've got to make all of your moves. They've got to be calculated. They've got to be somewhat precise. Every move is going to be as precise as others. And we've seen a lot of cars run wide off of this very turn here today, and trying to go the long way around the outside, trying to do the over-undercut is Menez Rodriguez. All he's trying to do there is get a longer run down the straight, turn more KPH here, and potentially have a move into one. You don't see a lot of moves into one here around this racetrack, but might you see one here? Menez Rodriguez down to the inside. He thinks about it. He gets shaded over to the far left by Boardman. Boardman doesn't move from the middle of the racetrack. Now goes to the inside. Menez Rodriguez around the outside. If he can hang here, he may have a shot in a couple of turns. He cannot. Boardman back out in front by themselves. Ordonez thinking about getting involved into this fight as well, as they're all starting to stack up a little bit behind the Greased Weasel racing car. Line astern, single file as they head into the second sector of the racetrack. And that was a couple of corners where you might have thought about forcing a move in there. More controlled Menez Rodriguez is. He didn't do that at all. What does Ordonez do? How do they fit into this puzzle right now? It is a fight for silver honors, and he is a pro car. Martin Foster for RPMS has been around, and they have rejoined the track without any further incident. A little bit strung out now between these cars. A momentary moment to breathe and regroup.
Yeah, breathe and regroup. I think Menez Rodriguez has about another lap or so in it, and really got to get a move on if he wants to jump up onto the podium today. I just want to touch back on lap 29, of course, turn 14, where we are now. We saw contact between the 69 and the 464. Stewards have made a decision, but there's contact. Curse to the commentator, tandem spinning. Both drivers parked on the apex, and they get going once again. Engines fired, but Menez Rodriguez spins it, getting a little bit too eager on the throttle. And I was going to say lap 29, turn 14, incident involving the 69 and the 464. Seemed a racing incident at that point. That was, of course, when we saw the bumper-to-bumper rub as they went into the braking zone. But much more terrible stuff there. And Stewart's probably going to be looking at that one, Jesse. Let's have a race replay.
Here's a replay going down the inside. It looks like had tried the move on the outside to Benez Rodriguez a couple of times. It didn't come off. Decides to go down the inside because Boardman left it open. Slides in there, realizes that there is still aero wash on these cars and that the brakes lock up and that you're sliding around. Got into Boardman, and that was all she wrote. Synchronized spinning off of the final turn. How many times have we seen that in the past? But Jeffrey McGill, Reno Ritchie will be completely unawares as they drive to yet another impressive win here in the Porsche Cup. The Boomer Squad 911 wins it here in Valencia.
Fantastic drive, of course, from Renault Ritchie there, taking the checkered flag. Of course, Raphael Huell looks to set himself into the silver winning spot for Team Blaupunkt there, the German driver, the number 21, fending off Nyring, Lindgren, and Dvorak in that fight. And
Oh, wow.
Boswell celebrating a little bit too keenly there with Dvorak and Klaus Nyring picking their way through the middle. Christian Lindgren, of course, in fourth, Dvorak in fifth, and Pablo Ordonez, of course, biding his time with the Boardman Menez Rodriguez fight, takes P6. And I just want to say a big thank you once again to Ash Bibby for another £10 for the servers and a new Pez dispenser. I can't remember the last time I saw a Pez dispenser, Jesse.
You can find them at Poundland, surely. Not an ad for Poundland, by the way, not sponsored. Thank you, Ash Bibby, for the humongous £10 donation to RCI TV. Now that will pay for servers for a week, I think. I think that absolutely will cover it. So thank you very much. Of course, we do that out of pocket. Actually, I think in the interest of transparency, I'm pretty sure Ryan Gill, Tom Bryant do. So they will appreciate that absolutely 110%. So thank you, Ash Bibby, for that very generous donation. Not only helping us, but helping yourself now. That's more races you can enter thanks to that donation. So thank you very much.
Indeed, thank you big time to Ash. And Mike Redford with a mad celebration through the last corner, realizing everybody else had finished. He was the only car to finish and getting all of the airtime, doing a lovely pirouette after backing the Porsche into turn 14. This is how the grid sat in the end, of course, after post-race penalties have been dealt out. Again, subject to any further reports once the the checker flag is drawn. Renault, we're jumping to Roscam taking the victory from Mike Redford, Kevin Boss, and the Dvorak. Tim Ireland in fifth, Foster sixth, Hutchings seventh, Ibiza Racer eighth, and Callum Kerrigan, unfortunately, a DNF on lap 8, didn't see the checkered flag. And of course, the silver honors went to Raphael Huell, and the silver Dvorak again on that one. Andy Boardman in third, managed to hold off, of course, Menez Rodriguez after the crash into turn 14. Kingston Lee in P5, Richard Phillips and Yao Manzo for RPMS in 6 and 7. John Racer in 8th, Geikin after a fantastic fight with Joe Dorber in 9th, Martins in 10th, and of course, Jake Boswell in 11th. And of course, it was Renault Ritchie that took your overall race win and pro honors from Klaus Nyring. Christian Lindgren in 3rd, Ordonez in 4th, Joe Dorber in 5th, and Brocklehurst in 6th overall. I think that ticks off all the pro cars for today. Fantastic race, fantastic circuit. Jesse Lee, it's been wonderful. Again, 38 laps of the Spanish circuit, and action from green to checker. It's proved once again while we love to see Valencia, even be it a new circuit and drivers still maybe cutting their teeth, it's got a lot of potential still.
Makes a lot of good racing, doesn't it? How many side-by-sides did we see tonight? Some mistakes, of course, on the heads of the drivers. Some of that, though, admittedly, a little bit more to do with the handling nature of the car. But so many drivers answering the call here, putting on a show, not least of which Joe Dauber, who started 26th or 27th and ended up in the top 10 after all. Shout out to everybody was able to finish today's race. It may have been tough. I know a lot of drivers, they'll take a few hours off. You know how sim racers are. They want to get back in the rig, but they might take a little bit of a time off. Very sweaty, tired right now. But what a race it was. What a show. And some surprising fireworks there at the end. Everything you could have asked for in a race.
Yeah, absolutely everything you could have asked for, I'd say, Jesse. It's fantastic to see the one make again being such a successful championship for all the action. I mean, we've seen Ginettas, we've seen Lamborghini Super Trofeos, we've now seen the 992s come back around once again, and it just proves that this format of racing does work indeed. And if you do want to get involved, of course, with us here at RCI, you can head on over to the website racerci.com where you can find all of our events signups right now. We do have a couple of iRacing events open. We got the Formula 1600 at Virginia. We got the Legends Cup opening as well. Up and coming signups for a few more events in the mix with the Charlotte 150, the iRacing Road Season 2. We've got an MX5 at Daytona as well. So that's going to be Slipstreams Ahoy around the banking for that one. Night Owl, of course, is open. Wednesday's Team Championship, Mondays and Fridays. So if you want to slot yourself in anywhere, head on over to racerci.com. And of course, a quick message from our partners as always. We thanked them earlier in the broadcast. They've been cycling around the bottom left hand side of your screen. Of course, AK Esports, a leading Italian company in esports management and organization across the world, and working with us here at RCI with our service solutions. Check them out in our description down below. Driver61.com. Again, a few drivers, maybe some lessons in the field tonight for a few of the moves we did see, but you could, of course, get 25% off your driver coaching by using our discount code with a link in the description below, heading on over to driver61.com. Fanatec, again, needs no introduction to most of the people in ACC. You will know what they do, and we have an affiliate link down below in the description. So if you are looking to pick up the new quick release 2 that they've released, of course, click that link, buy one through us, and we get a few pennies in the pot for the RCI servers as well. And of course, the new partners for 2023, digitalmotorsports.com, offering a number of products and services from virtual driving experiences, corporate events, esports championships, driver training, simulator components, and even complete turnkey sim rig solutions. Be sure to check them out in the description down below. And of course, Go Setups, formed to be one of the premium esports setup stores for Assetto Corsa Competizione. Their primary aim to create all setups for all skill levels, whether you're esports ready or, of course, looking for a safer alternative for your car. I do know a few drivers tonight are probably running them because they do have a 992 pack, and they also have Jesse Lee. We say it every time, Jaguar pack for 1.9.
Sure do. That came in handy a few weeks ago, actually, for I think it was Joe Dauber, actually, who ran that car with 1.9 setups in mind. So, yeah, thank you, of course, to all of our partners that make this race. Thank you so much to Ash Bibby for their donations. Again, any donations or sponsorships or anything that we get from you at home goes right back into paying for server costs so that we can host more and more racing. And who doesn't like more racing? That just means that John, me, and Stewie and the rest of the crew, we can cover more, and we appreciate that wholeheartedly. What a race we had today! What a season it has been! Don't get overlooked. Jeffrey Miguel Rena Ritchie running the table so far here to go, and I just wonder, with 2 rounds left to go, we'll be at Paul Ricard next week. Can he win out, or will he be upset at some point? It's hard to imagine somebody toppling him from the top of the tower right now.
Yeah, I mean, the closest driver who's, even got remotely near, of course, was Nick Babin at Monza, looking like he was going to unsettle Renault Ritchie until he unfortunately ran out of fuel. And those two, being friends, ended up pushing each other around, of course, before Ordonez nearly robbed them both of a podium, and Renault Ritchie left him high and dry in the curve of Alboreto. So if Nick Babin's back for Paul Ricard or Bathurst, I think he could be the man to take it to Renault Ritchie. But of course, time will tell if we'll see Nick Babin, of course, compete us here on Mondays. Next broadcast for us here on RCI, stand me if I'm correct, Jesse Lee, should be the Friday GT Sprint Season 12, of course, where we go live at our usual time, always throwing up a broadcast a little bit beforehand so you can set that reminder and catch us when we do go live. Of course, round 4, Laguna Seca, and triple broadcast this week. Of course, World Tour this Saturday. That's one you don't want to miss. Of course, we head down under to Mount Panorama, where we will go for 6 hours green to checker with some good old G3 racing. So try on the channel for that one as well. But it's been a fantastic evening, of course, from us here at Valencia. It's been some great one make racing as always, and I can't wait for next week when we head to Paul Ricard with the long Mistral Straight. It's going to be fantastic. You're not going to want to miss it, so keep your eye on RCI TV, hit the subscribe button, the like button, and the bell icon and all that goodness to help us out here. But from myself, John Dalton, from Jesse Lee alongside me, and of course from Stewie behind the cameras and all our live stewards, bid you farewell for tonight. Hope you have a good rest of the week and take care of yourselves.